Will Dubai property market collapse or drop down in the rising inflation around the world? That's one of the biggest questions which a lot of investors and people who want to enter into Dubai property market have in their minds at the moment, and this is my topic for discussion for today. I'm going to start with talking about inflation first. Now, what is inflation? Of course, when the prices of commodities rise because the demand is so high in the market and the supply is less, that's called inflation, which is a very basic term. And you guys might have heard about the interest rates and curbing of inflation because of the interest rates, and the central banks or federal reserves in US, they are increasing the interest rates. I'll explain to you guys in the most layman terms I can about what all this thing means. Now, if the inflation rate increases, what the central bank tries to do is they try to increase the interest rates for the banks. Now, how does it have an effect? That the banks increase the interest rates on the mortgages so that less people borrow money and their purchasing power drops down. Hence, the demand in the market will drop down and meet the supply, and inflation, the price rise, is stopped in the market. Now, if this happens, how does it affect the property market? Of course, when the mortgage rates are going to increase, then lesser people are going to take mortgages to buy properties, and hence the demand is going to drop down as well in terms of property market. To be very specific about Dubai property market, I'll give you guys some numbers and then tell you guys my opinion on how has it affected the Dubai property market, all the rise in interest rates in terms of mortgages, and what's there in future as well for Dubai property market in this year at least. First, let's talk about numbers. Now, in May, I had already made a video where I mentioned about the transactions, but still I'm going to reiterate. The transactions were more than 18 billion dirhams, and out of those, the mortgage transactions were around 28%, 27 to 28%, which were around 4 to 5 billion dirhams approximately, which is less than 1/3 of the total residential transactions which are happening in Dubai property market as well. Now, according to news, May and according to data, May was recorded as the best ever single month in the last 13 years. From 2009 till 2022, this May specifically was the best May in terms of sales volume in the last 13 years. April was the second highest since 2009. So these 2 months, like all this, things about news about the interest rates and housing market being dropping is going on from last 3, 4, 5 months. But we have all the data which is present from Dubai Land Department, and all that data says that this is the best ever May in the last 13 years in terms of sales volume. So that part kind of negates, because of course only 1/3 transactions are happening in Dubai property market in terms of mortgages, or less than 1/3 actually. And of course, the total volume of sales is being the best since last 13 years, which is a good sign for the market. Now, if I talk about specifically about inflation rates, now let me tell you how much are the inflation rates about in the growing or developed economies and or the bigger economies, and what is the inflation rate in UAE. Now, inflation rate in US is 8.6%, or was in May 2022. In UK it was 9%. In India it was over 7%, and in UAE it was just 2.6%. Now, 2% is considered as to be a normal or a very low interest rate, which all the economies in the world thrive to go according to the economists and analysts. And Dubai is just at 2.6%. In the last 20 years, the average was 2.2% of inflation rate, and this time it's just 2.6%, which is like 25 to 30% of the big economies in the world. Also, because of the government policy, which if you read in the news, there's a government policy that they are freezing the price for 11,000 commodities, which are basic commodities, to stop or to curb inflation, which is a very, very good step by Dubai government or UAE government, so that inflation can be curbed in UAE. And this is why the purchasing power of people in Dubai, or who are residents of Dubai or locals of Dubai, has not reduced that much as compared to the other economies in the world, which are bigger economies. Third, the dirham is pegged with dollar, so it doesn't fluctuate, the UAE dirham. So it's a standard rate. $1 is 3.67 UAE dirhams. So there is no point of currency fluctuation as well with UAE or investments in UAE. Fourth, of course, the data says it all. I mentioned to you, you can see open data on Dubai Land Department's website about what all things are happening in UAE, how much are mortgage transactions, how much are sales transactions, in terms of residential sector, in terms of commercial sector. Everything can be checked online. Because of the rents also which have increased, a lot of people are actually taking mortgages at higher interest rates as well. Now in May, of course, the interest rates grew by 50 points, which US Federal Reserve announced. And here in UAE, of course, because it is pegged with dollar, in UAE as well, the interest rate increased by 50 basis points. But still we saw like 28-29% of mortgage transactions, which were of course less than 1/3, but still they were there. And because of the rents have increased, people are now moving to taking mortgages and just paying off the mortgage and buy a property in Dubai. So this is one of the reasons as well that why Dubai property market is growing, because people are preferring to buy an apartment on a mortgage rate, even at a higher mortgage rate, because the rents have gone up immensely in Dubai property market. And this is why these are some of the reasons why Dubai property market hasn't been affected by the inflation. We saw more than 60 billion dirhams of residential sale transactions in Dubai in the first 5 months of this year, and there are no signs of inflation being hitting UAE or Dubai property market specifically at that high pace, which it is doing to other property markets in the world. Now, what will happen in this year, or if the interest rates are increased? First, UAE government's policies and measures are to be trusted, like freezing a price freeze of 11,000 commodities is a very good move by them, and this is why the purchasing power of people will still stay. And even if the mortgage rates are increased, the important part over here is the purchasing power of people, not just the interest rates. And purchasing power of people will still stay because the prices are not increasing for all the rest of the commodities. There's a price freeze, you can read it about online as well. And if I talk about number of transactions, then approximately 70% of transactions in residential property market are happening on cash or bank or manager's check, and not by mortgage. So just less than 1/3 of property transactions in the last 5 months have happened in mortgages, which is a very, very low number. Usually it's more than 40% or 50% of transactions in mortgages, and it's just less. So it's also not gonna affect even if the interest rates are high. What I personally feel, that if the interest rates increase too much, there may be a little drop down, like maybe 4-5% possibly, but that's also uncertain because the government is taking such good measures. The people's purchasing power is there. Of course, people moving into buying a property, then renting a property. And the most important part here about expats is that dirham is pegged with dollar. So other countries are facing currency fluctuations as well, that the currency is depreciating against the US dollar, but dirham is standard against US dollar, and people invest in Dubai because that is one of the reasons, that the currency fluctuation is not there. It's there standard with the US dollar. So even if your country has a depreciating currency against the US dollar, if you get the money converted or invested in Dubai or a property in Dubai, you're gonna pay in dirhams, you're gonna get dirhams back whenever you sell that investment, and that's a safe investment because there is no currency fluctuation as well. So some of the reasons which I mentioned, I think that these are valid reasons, and this is my opinion honestly, that I don't think that Dubai property market is going to affect that much with this inflation and all the interest rate rise going on because of these certain reasons. You can write down in the comments below if you think something different, and if you also have some points of how this inflation is going to affect Dubai property market, and I'll be happy to answer all your comments as well. So thank you so much guys for being in this video. This was just from my side, and I hope you guys put some comments down so that I also know a different opinion for different people. See you guys until next time. Thank you so much for being in the video.